It said you had a recent post where you said authenticity matters. You know, and that thought leaders isn't about flashy content, but about showing up and being real. What does being real look like for a professional brand in practice?
Yeah. I think that, there's a fine line, right, between showing up and being messy or showing up and
Mhm.
being just being real and being authentic and genuine. You don't have to tell everyone your every little dirty secret, but showing up in a way where you're sharing your journey around things. Like it's okay to share stories of times that something didn't work, right? One of the things for me, when I lost my job in 2024 and I was laid off and there's a lot of, emotions around that, but I showed up in a way that people were, um, you know, I was telling my story, right? I told that I had lost my job and here's what I'm going to do next and here's and people were cheering for me, right? So we don't have to hide from the public and not share some of those things. Like we can share in a way that people want to join us in the journey, right? And cheering us on and being a support system to us. And even 20 years into business, people, find that they're still learning, right? And it's okay to share some of that learning. And it doesn't make you look like you're not credible. It really just helps people connect with you. I think another way that business owners and anyone building a personal brand can show up in a way that's real is to not just show up. Like if you're creating content on LinkedIn, it doesn't always have to be professional and corporate and stuffy. We can show our personality. We can show, something related to our kids or, when I ran a marathon, I shared that on LinkedIn, like, hey, this was a big accomplishment for me. And we can show things happening in our life without oversharing, but in a way that people connect with us. And that's really, again, going back to that human connection. We want to connect with people. We don't just want to see your successes, your awards, the Instagram, reel of your life. We want to see, just more of you and things that people can connect with you around.
Hello, everyone. Our guest today is Kelly, founder and CEO of 2 Mile High Marketing, a personal brand agency that helps experts move from the best kept secret to the trusted authority. With over 20 years of publishing and marketing, she spent years making others and other leaders shine. With over 20 years, though, I mean, she has acquired corporations, pushed her to go all in on her dreams, and in a year and a half, she grew a thought leadership agency, unlocking your authority X factor, and now coaches other entrepreneurs like myself, especially women, to claim their spotlight. Kelly, welcome to Unfiltered Conversations.
Michael, thank you for having me.
No problem, no problem. Let's get into question one. Kelly, you built your business out of the beautiful mountains of Colorado, literally 2 miles above sea level. How does that incorporate living in that environment, incorporate into your, I guess, your cachet of being a leader in marketing and strategic outlook?
Yeah, well, so I named my company 2 Mile High Marketing because I live at 2 miles high in elevation. People know Denver as the Mile High City, and I actually live in the mountains of Colorado, so we're another mile high. So I actually, when I started my business, I had some fun with that. So my title as CEO, I call myself the Chief Elevation Officer, kind of playing with the elevation and then also we elevate thought leaders, right? So yeah, so I have some fun with that, and yeah, my team though is spread out. So I'm in Colorado, but my team is in other locations because we work remotely. So, but it's just kind of a fun part of our brand and what we do here at the company.
That's pretty awesome. What's your favorite thing about living there outside of work?
Well, I like to run, so I like the outdoors. I specifically wanted a views. We have a house with a beautiful view, and we get to run. I get to run in the woods, the forest, with the view of Mount Elbert, which is the tallest peak in Colorado, just right outside of my house.
And I want to say kudos because we did some research and we found out that you actually own a lovely coffee shop. Well, you're co-owner of that coffee shop, if I'm not mistaken.
I am.
Yes,
You did. You do your research.
we're trying over here. We're trying over here. You're balancing that creative, retail business with running a marketing firm. How those two worlds overlap for you?
Yeah, well, I'm fortunate. I get to drink the coffee. I don't go into the coffee shop and work there. My husband runs it, but yeah, we do. We own a coffee shop in Leadville, Colorado, which is it's kind of a tourist town. So we get a lot of traffic during ski season and then during the summer when people come here to enjoy the mountains. But I handle a little bit of just the marketing side of the business and the online retail because that's where my skill set is. And then I get to spend the rest of the time focused on my business, to my high marketing. But yeah, I do help with some of the online marketing stuff for the coffee shop as well.
And that's kind of amazing. You said it's a very high tourist location. So do you find a lot of ideas from clients and a lot of tourists where you interact with people when you're chatting with the customers?
But do I find a lot of what was that?
Like find a lot of ideas for clients. Like when they're talking about different things, you're like, oh man, I could do this to help this person over here and use it in your business accordingly.
Yeah. Well, every conversation helps you learn a little bit more about people and what they like. And, one of the things about the coffee shop marketing is that because it's a tourist town, it's the marketing of the coffee is very based around nostalgia. People come there for a reason. They're vacation, they're doing something exploring in the mountains, camping, whatever. But they have these great memories of being on that trip, right? And so getting our coffee, subscribing to our coffee and getting it at home is a good reminder of that. And so, there's a little bit of that there. And then the marketing that we do at 2 Mile High is more, speaking, like helping people develop their speaking platforms, LinkedIn networking. It's a very, very different type of marketing. That's what's really interesting about marketing is it can be very different based on what the product and the service is. But I think the key in all of it is people, right? So you're marketing to people in a way that you're trying to reach them where they are, and it doesn't matter what you're selling, whether it's a product, a service, a bag of coffee, or your services as a marketer. It's all about how you relate to people and how you stand out to them.
And that's very, very interesting because like you're no slouch yourself, right? As we was going through and just even in your intro, I was talking about you having over 2 decades of basically marketing, behind the scenes where you was helping other CEOs, make the best of themselves. And tell us about those years in publishing and marketing where you was behind the scenes helping corporations and companies and CEOs, make the best of their dollars.
Yeah. So I spent 10 years in publishing. I was the vice president of a publishing company. And, my role, I was very focused on the corporate marketing side of things. So helping market the publishing business. And my boss specifically, he would travel to events where there was authors and, helping him kind of establish his own kind of being the face of the company. When I left there, I worked in marketing and I was marketing at a virtual CFO firm. So, similar thing where I was helping the founder of the company stand out, helping him develop his thought leadership platform through having a book in hand, going out and speaking, getting on podcasts, all of these ways that were really helping showcase him as the expert in his industry. So, that was kind of the background that I had. And when I started 2 Mile High Marketing, what I wanted to do was to help other business owners develop their thought leadership platform in the way that I had seen work for my previous bosses and the work that I did there.
So what's most exciting about your marketing firm that you kind of particularly touch on in your field?
Well, so for us, we get to work specifically with business owners who want to get out and speak, right? And I think what's
Mhm,
exciting right now is, the marketing world is really being impacted by AI, and a lot of marketing agencies are not sure what the future looks like because AI is replacing a lot of things. It can build you a website now. It can, developer jobs are in jeopardy. It can write your content for you. Jobs in any kind of content writing are in jeopardy, right? But with the work we do, what's exciting is that what's really going to make people stand out now and going forward as AI gets better and better is human connection and people getting on stages and speaking and showing who they are, showing their personality and their expertise. That's what's really going to help businesses grow as AI is making everything so generic in our content, the ways that we show up. I think I saw a video this morning. It was very random. Mountain goats climbing or walking on this really thin ledge, and all these comments saying it's crazy how we don't know anymore what's real and what's AI, right? Even in a video format, we don't know anymore if that was a real video somebody took or if that was created by AI. When you're showing up in person and connecting with people face to face, it makes you stand out more than any kind of content online now. So I think that's exciting just to see what happens there. And I think that people, although we all gravitate to this AI and how we can use it as a tool, we also all crave human connection and want to be connected with real people. So I think it's going to be exciting to see kind of what happens there and how much more in-person events become more important.
and that is so true, especially in the age now with AI and how your agency is kind of built on like 3 pillars of visibility, credibility, and consistency, right? And when I see all that, I think, especially when you're talking about AI, it becomes or it all melds together to me to authenticity and you expressing that now everybody's kind of like AI is generic, right? And I believe everybody's going to start craving that off this authenticity where now they want something that they can touch, they can feel, they know is real. And I'm glad that you guys are on the forefront of that. So how did you land those pillars? And also, and now you're kind of like a visionary that you're moving in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah, so I created that framework that you talked about, the visibility, credibility, and consistency. When I go out and speak, I talk about that. So I go into kind of those three pillars and how anyone who's wanting to build a personal brand or develop their thought leadership platform, those are the three things that they need to be concerned about or thinking about, right? So how to get visible in front of their target audience, how to be seen as credible. And so one of the ways, for example, to be seen as credible is having your own book, right? And I'm going to show you that I just published my own book a couple weeks ago because I teach this, and so I needed to practice what I preach and have my own book, right? But having that book gives you that credibility as the expert in your field, right? And then consistency is about showing up regularly. So I told you I just published this book and I did a couple posts last week talking about it. But I can't rely on just those 2 posts to be all that, I ever put out there. I have to keep showing up in ways that people are gonna remember that that book exists, right? So I need to make sure that I create, some content around that on a regular basis where I'm constantly reminding people like, "Hey, I wrote this book. This book is out there to help you." And showing up consistently, you can feel like a broken record. It can feel like you're saying the same things over and over again, but it's a good way to help people remember and to associate you with those topics that you are the expert in. So yeah, so those are the three things that I teach is, how to get visible, how to become credible or show your credibility and how to show up consistently.
Wow. In your own life, which pillars have you found hardest to maintain?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say credibility because visibility is one thing, right? Like you can show up, you can grow a following on any platform. Consistency, it's about discipline and having, I have time on my calendar every week to create posts on LinkedIn. So it's a reminder to myself every week to do that work. Credibility is the one that I think it takes time. Right. So you can't be credible on day one of starting something. You have to gain that credibility by doing good work and then being able to maybe humbly brag about that work that you've done, right? So being able to show people. and sometimes that feels uncomfortable too. My book itself, I couldn't have written that book 20 years ago. That book, I tell my stories and experiences over 20 years in my career, right? And so that credibility, having that book in hand, came from 20 years of experience. So I would say it's hard. That's probably the hardest one for most people, is that it takes time to build that credibility up and to be able to showcase your expertise.
And like I said earlier, and also I think we did some research, if I'm not mistaken, if I go to my notes, it said you had a recent post when you said authenticity matters, and that thought leaders isn't about flashy content, but about showing up and being real. What does being real look like for a professional brand in practice?
Yeah. I think that, there's a fine line, right, between showing up and being messy or showing up and
Hmm.
being just being real and being authentic and genuine. You don't have to tell everyone your every little dirty secret, but showing up in a way where you're sharing your journey around things. Like, it's okay to share stories of times that something didn't work, right? One of the things for me, when I lost my job in 2024 and I was laid off, and there's a lot of, emotions around that. But I showed up in a way that people were, um, you know, I was telling my story, right? I told that I had lost my job, and here's what I'm going to do next, and here's what's going, and people were cheering for me, right? So we don't have to hide from the public and not share some of those things. Like, we can share in a way that people want to join us in the journey, right? And be cheering us on and being a support system to us. And, even 20 years into business, people find that they're still learning, right? And it's okay to share some of that learning, and it doesn't make you look like you're not credible. It really just helps people connect with you. I think another way that business owners and anyone building a personal brand can show up in a way that's real is to not just show up. Like, if you're creating content on LinkedIn, it doesn't always have to be professional and corporate and stuffy. We can show our personality. We can show, something related to our kids, or, when I ran a marathon, I shared that on LinkedIn, like, hey, this was a big accomplishment for me. And we can show things happening in our life without oversharing, but in a way that people connect with us. And that's really, again, going back to that human connection. We want to connect with people. We don't just want to see your successes, your awards, the Instagram, reel of your life. We want to see, just more of you and things that people can connect with you around.
So, have you ever posted something that you felt that was a little too personal, and how did people react to it?
No, I don't know if I don't remember a time where I felt like that exactly, but I will say I love TikTok. And so I am a TikToker. I post a lot on TikTok every day. And there are times where I'm like, I don't know who's going to see this, right? Like, I think I wouldn't say that I feel like I overshare, but there are times where you feel a little silly or a little like, whatever, right? And it's okay. I'm not posting those same videos on LinkedIn, right? It's the platform, and it's the way that people do engage with you on TikTok, and that's okay. But I know sometimes people in my personal life will see things and go, "Huh, why are you posting that?" It's like, well, I don't regret it, but sometimes it feels a little weird.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you. And it's amazing with that, because it's like a lot of times, like for me, like I'm not a sharing person, so like I give you a quick anecdote. So our family was in a group chat, all talking, and then we started video calling one another. So it's a big video call, and then my wife was like, "Oh, my butt hurts," and she started, and everybody's like, "What? What?" And then it's like, "Oh," I said, and she's like, "I'm sorry, guys, too much information." You're like, "Yes, way too much," you know.
Yeah, at least it was the family chat, right? It wasn't on social
Yeah.
media.
Yeah, and that's what I said. That's what I said. Oh, but it was just hilarious. My wife does not have a filter, so it's pretty funny how she does that. But that's like, something like with oversharing for just like for whatever reason, just it works. I mean, it's funny, it works, right? You always stress the importance, and you have even just in the short time we've been talking about being authentic, being specific, and being an expert in your field, right? Early on, did you struggle at all trying to narrow your focus down into what you do when it comes to marketing, especially getting that clarity?
Yeah. So
or was it immediate?
well, maybe both. I don't know. I'll tell you and you could tell me. So, before I started my business, my thought was that I was going to start doing fractional CMO work, which if for anyone who's not familiar with that, it's people can hire a fractional CMO to be oversee the marketing for their company, but not having to hire a full-time person. So, a fractional CMO would work part-time for a company, but then they would have several different clients or companies that they work with. And that's what I thought I was going to do. But when it came time to decide for sure how I was going to market and how I was going to, what I was going to put out there into the world, I didn't like the idea of saying I was a fractional CMO because I feel like that can be really interpreted any different way by people. It feels too generic. And so I wanted to get very specific with the exact type of marketing that I was best able to help people with. In fact, I showed you my book. So my book is called Unlocking Your Authority X Factor. And what I call that Authority X Factor was I leaned into knowing how I was best equipped to help people. That 10 years of experience in publishing and then the 7 years of experience I had in marketing and how those two things overlapped and then equipped me to best business owners. So it was really leaning into my specific skills and experience, my authority X factor, and what I really made sense for me. So I wanted to be specific and not general. And so I would say that came together for me pretty quickly once I needed to decide how to move forward with the business. But I had a couple years of thinking about it before I started the business. So I don't know if it came together quickly or really over a couple of years before I had to kind of make some decisions if I really was like, so I don't know if it was quick or not, but it felt quick
Yeah.
at the time.
I bet. And like you said, you had 10 years in publishing, 7 years with marketing, right? So it's like in that time, was there a mentor or a moment when you realized what made you stand out, especially building your
Yeah, I think my experience at my former company in really elevating my boss, who was a virtual CFO, really the work I did there, I think, is what really equipped me for that next step because everything we did for him was thought leadership based. Thought leadership, getting him out to do speaking, getting him on podcasts, getting him talking as much as possible to really get his thoughts and ideas out of his head so we could take it and turn it into a blog post and turn it into a clip. So I think that period of time was really really crucial for me in learning and then understanding how to best serve people going forward because we saw just that company grew while I was in marketing there. We grew the company from 4 million to 12 million in that 7 years. And right. So it was significant growth. And I saw that the strategy, the work that we did really did truly work. So I wanted to be able to do that for other business owners as well.
So is that something that because I saw like in your 2 Mile High offerings, you called it, I think it was speaker elevation plan to get clients booked on stage. So when you guys do that, what's the most unexpected speaking opportunity you gotten for clients?
Oh, that's a good question. So yeah, so our speaker elevation plan is where we help business owners with getting speaking events, doing podcast interviews, and then we do their LinkedIn management. Maybe the most surprising was I had a client that we got her on a webinar. So it was a really easy lift for her. She didn't have to go anywhere. She just did her talk in an hour on a webinar, but that webinar then turned into who was there, reached out and asked about her speaker fee and invited her to come speak at their retreat. And we got her a $5,000 speaking event. So it came from a free event that she did, but then led to a nice sized paid event for her. And what I tell anyone who's wanting to do speaking, like you really do have to do as many free ones as you can at first to build up the experience, the reputation, to be able to get some footage of you talking and things like that. So, it worked out great for her.
So when you look at your own daily life, right? You probably did cold emails, reaching out to different people. How have you changed your habits and your approach when I guess targeting clients?
Well, I don't do cold email. I'm very inbound based. So, I believe in doing blog posts to build up your SEO to get organic traffic and doing video content or LinkedIn content or things ways that you're putting yourself out there and building up awareness for what you do. So, all of that, I think the biggest change for me just went from doing what I do for
Mhm.
other people. It was really easy to put my boss on a stage or schedule him on a podcast. When I started my business, I had to go, "Oh, I am now the face of the company. I am now the person who needs to go out and speak and do these things." And so that was really it was the same strategy, but putting myself in that position instead of just doing it for someone else or putting them in that position. So changing to like be the person in the spotlight is a little bit of a mindset shift.
As a CEO, a lot of times the business rise and falls, not necessarily on you all the time, but but a majority of it because you're the brainchild, you're the one who created it. How and what does that balanced day look like for you when you're trying to manage, you and your life, your personal life, and now your business as well?
Yeah. Well, I am a huge calendar blocker, so everything goes on my calendar. In fact, today I didn't have a very good day of sticking to what I put on my calendar. I had some other things that came up that I wanted to work on, but I was able to look at what I had, like the things I thought I was going to do today, and tell myself like, okay, these things are less urgent, right? And so I was able to move those blocks to next week. But I block off time for everything. So if I know I need to spend time pitching a client to events, I make sure that's on my calendar. If I need to spend time on some sort of administrative work, I put that on my calendar. So everything goes on there, including personal. So even if it's a personal item, like it just goes on. So everything, it's just my day is blocked to make sure that I get everything fit in.
So have you had someone in your team that helped you, like, I guess, switch off? Like, I know you probably have a lot of maybe remote coworkers, but do they like reach out and like, hey, ma'am, I noticed you didn't X this one out right there. What are you doing? Get off or, you know,
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, my team will if there's something I need to get done, they know,
yeah,
it needs to go on my calendar. Because if I say like, "Oh, yeah, I'll get to that later," like, yeah, if it's not on my calendar, it's not gonna happen, right? So, but I give access to my team members, like, they have access to my calendar, so, like, if they need to meet with me to get something done, they just put time on my calendar, or if they know I needed to work on something, they'll block off time for me or whatever. So, yeah, it's they definitely are help me in that way because they know how my
yeah.
tendency and how I like to manage my calendar in that way.
No, I got you. 100%. You know, you kind of talked about where you got laid off and then, and you push forward and now you started your own business, which can be extremely, extremely challenging and tough. And it was like, what made you want to, I guess, say, you know what, I'm gonna venture out on my own and I'm gonna get it out the mud. I'm gonna start it from scratch.
Yeah. Um, well, so my company was acquired 2 years before I lost my job, and so I had that
Mm-hmm.
that couple of years where I kinda suspected that I was going to lose my job. So for that 2 years, I was really, like, thinking about it, and that's where I was like, "I think I'll start a fractional CMO service," and that's kinda where my like, why I had that couple of years to think about it. So when I lost my job, then it was kind of like, "Okay, now you need to, like, you gotta make a decision. Are you gonna start this business or are you gonna go and find another job being what I call the person behind the person? Like, are you gonna keep elevating other people or are you gonna do it on your own?" And so that was the point where I made the decision to do this. It scared the absolute crap out of me. And
I get that.
I just felt like it was my sign that, like, okay, you've been thinking about this for a long time. Like, it's time to do it. So that was kind of the deciding factor for me.
What was the hardest internal struggle you faced that first year starting that business, starting that growth?
The growth the first 6 months was actually, like, really fast. I think that yeah, I mean, so really fast, but almost in a way that, like, set us up for unrealistic expectations, right? So we
Uh,
grew really fast, and then I hired a bunch of people, and then, I had some people not work out, and I think that was a challenge, right? So dealing with because we work remotely, I got taken advantage of a couple of times where people were not actually working or they like had another job and we discovered that. And so there's some ugly situations like that. The early days before all of that, I think the challenge was kind of like, where are the clients gonna come from, right? And but then it just kind of happened really quickly, so it wasn't much of a challenge at that point. Then, like I said, we grew, and then it was kind of like, we had a project end, and then we lost one client, and then we kinda, like, went down, and it was like, "Oh," and so you kinda learn, like, there's these ups and downs of business that I wasn't really prepared for, and I'm still kinda navigating that, like, learning when is it time to hire somebody, and how do you set your pricing to make sure that, everything is covered, and, all of that. But I'm still learning, and I think all of that's just a part of the journey, and you figure it out as you go.
Mm. And you haven't, you kind of alluded to it, but know, working in entrepreneurship, like people always talk about that's the dream, right? That's the goal. They're like, yes, I want to be an entrepreneur, but they don't really understand how, it can be very, very lonely. When you felt like that pressure, did you ever like doubt your path or you had a moment you feel like you was, what's they call it, imposter syndrome?
Well, yeah, so definitely those early days of going, "Okay, if I'm gonna grow this business, I have to start being the face. I have to start going out and talking, going out and speaking, doing podcast interviews." Those things were really challenging for me because I just had never been in that role before. So yes, like it feels really weird, but you start to get used to it, and it starts to become your personality, right? But for 20 years I worked for other people, so it wasn't normal to me at first.
And that's true. That wow, that's pretty amazing because it's like, especially you starting your own business. My goodness, I could just like I tried to start two businesses before. One when I was in Okinawa, and it was hectic. I saw it was a yard based online yard based business where yard sales was coming becoming a thing, and people was doing Craigslist, but Craigslist was like it's kind of shady. And so I made a website. I got with the developer and we made a website, everything. And basically my job, what I guess what is called Marcari now. I was doing the same thing. My goal was to do the same thing like Marcari. And this was like over a decade and a half ago, where I was just gonna, charge a small percentage and a fee and then from each sale, and I was gonna make money like that. I mean, it was a good concept. I think it was just the wrong time, and I got the wrong developer, and things didn't work out. And that's one of those things that I'm like, man, I should have just toughed it out and got through it, right? And and push, 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 no matter if it didn't look good, but the end result could have been something, amazing. So I do understand when especially when you're talking about that, like how that affects everything. In your book, Unlocking Your Authority X Factor, what gaps do you most want to, or you think the book fills when, especially in marketing, publishing, and just entrepreneurship as a whole?
Yeah. Um, well, I've done a lot of speaking in the last year, and so I talk a lot about, the frameworks we talked about earlier, the visibility, credibility, consistency. And, one of the things I noticed was that after I would talk, people would come up to me and they would be very, very interested in what I taught, the idea of building their personal brand, the idea of going out and speaking. They were really like just eating that up and like, yes, I need to be doing this, right? But what I started to discover was that a lot of the people who were talking to me were small businesses. They were maybe a solopreneur, maybe they have like, a VA or something, but like they're pretty small and they don't have it in the budget to hire an agency. So they wanted to do what we were doing, but they couldn't afford to hire us. And so that's really where this book came about was I kept thinking I need a way to help people like that who do want to build their personal brand, but maybe they just aren't as far along yet, and they need more help with like identifying what their authority X factor is, how they should be showing up, just know understanding kind of what that building a personal brand involves. So that was the gap that I saw. So we published the book. I also launched a podcast. I have a podcast already. One podcast that I have is Beyond the Bestseller, where I feature female authors of nonfiction books. But I decided to launch a second podcast called Authority X Factor, where I'm interviewing entrepreneurs who are thought leaders in their industry that smaller businesses, smaller, solopreneurs, small business owners can learn from. And so I did that second. And then the last thing we're going to be doing in the fall is launching a course. So another tool to help those folks who are wanting to build their personal brand. They're, maybe they've read the book, maybe they're listening to the podcast, but they need just a little more in depth. Like, I need to learn this and really start applying it. So that course is kind of the thing that we're working on now that we want to launch in the fall to be able to help people just a little bit more.
And in writing your book, what was a surprise lesson you learned by writing that?
Well, this might sound silly, but my mom was one of my first readers, and she was a teacher her whole career, and she has her own book that she was published through a traditional publisher, and it was a book related to the work that she did. I was never a teacher ever, and so I think one of the surprising things for me was my mom read it and was like, wow, like you like are a natural teacher. She was surprised by some of the teaching concepts that I had used in the book. So learning a little bit about myself and my own ability to communicate and help people apply uh, what I'm teaching. So yeah, I mean, I think that was kind of a surprise to me that it came through in a way that was really helpful to her. I had a couple other beta readers who also gave great feedback, and so it spoke to them, on the personal branding level as well, and just getting that feedback from people and feeling like this is going to truly help people. That was really surprising. I mean, maybe it shouldn't be surprising, but it's like really
Yeah,
satisfying to know that that was the case.
yeah, I bet. So my last question for you before we head out and turn over the floor to be yours. What did I not ask that I should have asked when we're
Man,
having this discussion?
I don't know. I feel like we covered a lot of ground in this conversation. We talked a lot about personal branding, thought leadership. You did do your homework. That was you dug deep there. That was great. Yeah. I don't think I could think of anything that you didn't ask, Michael. I think you did great.
Thank you, thank you. Well, the floor is yours. Please tell us about any and everything you're doing and how my viewers and listeners can get a hold of you and actually see what you're doing and be of service.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned the book it's the full title is Unlocking Your Authority X Factor. So if you're interested in building a personal brand, the book is a great resource for that. And you can find out more about the book at authorityxfactor.com. When you go there, if you are thinking like, I'm kind of curious about building a personal brand, there's a quiz at the top of the page. So at the top, there's a link that takes you to the personal brand scorecard. You click on that, you take the quiz. It takes about 3 minutes to take the quiz. So it's super quick and easy. And it gives you a score in the end, tells you kind of where you stand as, with your personal brand, and gives you basically some things to work on. Like, if you want to get to the next level, here's what to work on to build your personal brand. So that is a great way to get started, right? If even if you have a really high score, and good for you if you do, but it will confirm that for you and still give you some tips and advice around that. So authorityxfactor.com, you'll learn about the book. You could take the personal brand scorecard as well.
Kelly, thank you for sharing your story, your wisdom, and your emphasis on this authenticity and finding your unique X factor. And it really, really resonated with me. And I know it really resonated with my viewers and listeners. And I'm sure that we will benefit greatly from your insights. Thanks again for being here. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Michael.
Have a wonderful day, guys.